Good afternoon. Hi, I'm Joni Bruce. I'm with the Oklahoma Family Network. We're so glad that you're joining us today, and we're glad you're attending. This is actually a project of the Oklahoma Children's Behavioral Health Network. And if you're not familiar with the network, we're a group of family organizations who really care about kids' mental health and substance use. It's comprised of course, Oklahoma Family Network, as well as Evolution Foundation, Parents Helping Parents, in NAMI, Oklahoma. So we're on behalf of the network, we're really glad you're here. Oklahoma Family Network is Family Voices of Oklahoma, which is, we are an affiliate or a chapter. And the goal of Family Voices from a national perspective, as well as in our state, is to ensure that children's health is absolutely the best that it can be. And so we help to find resources offered to provide training. And then we also engage in advocacy and leadership opportunities. So we're glad you're here today. We'll be touching on the nuts and bolts of telemedicine and a little bit about your family's first telemedicine appointment. And this training actually was developed by the National Family Voices Office, provided with funding from the Human Resources Services Administration, Maternal and Child Health Bureau. Family Voices actually has developed 4 trainings around telehealth, telemedicine, and what we've decided today is that we're actually doing the 4th training because it has a little bit of the other 3, and then really good tips on preparing ourselves for a telemedicine or telehealth visit with either our child or just for our own health. So Malcolm X said, when I is replaced with we, even illness can become wellness. And it's been so important, especially through COVID, but even in non-COVID times, that we be able to access appropriate health care, whether we have transportation or not. And using forms of telehealth is a great way to do that. So what we're going to talk about today is our family's first, or perhaps you've already had telemedicine appointments, but we'll be looking at, what are the 4 pieces to the puzzle of having a successful visit, what your rights are, but also your responsibilities as well as that of your provider. We'll talk a little bit about the things we need to do before the visit, what we can do during the visit to ensure that it's successful, and then what we need to do after the visit to finish up. So questions and that sort of thing that you can connect with your provider later. So our objectives, our hope is that you're going to learn ways to prepare for your telemedicine appointment, that you'll be able to identify accommodations that your family may need for a successful appointment and how to ask for them, and then to identify one strategy to avoid or improve a difficult telemedicine visit. So let's get started. Tele what? Did you what? Telemedicine's often used interchangeably with telehealth, but actually telemedicine is focused on the clinical aspect of care. So it might be the video appointment that you have with your child's pediatrician, or it could be a virtual therapy session with your young adult's speech therapist or licensed practical counselor. Telehealth, on the other hand, is the use of electronic information and telecommunication technologies. So you may be using the phone, it could be an iPad, it could be a video conferencing, it could be recorded, it could be something that's been recorded that you can watch later. It also can be things like storing and forwarding imaging. And so if you had an MRI or something like that, and that could actually be transferred from one physician to another, or from a hospital or an outpatient center to a physician. It also can include wireless communication and even texting. So what does it mean when we use the term family-centered telehealth? So family-centered telehealth is a way of providing services through a variety of digital platforms that assures the health and well-being of children and youth with special healthcare needs and their families through respectful family professional partnerships. And that's a lot of jargon to just basically say, we want our telehealth sessions to be provided to us in a way that we feel respected and that we think that it was of equal or even greater value than an in-person visit might have included. Oops, gosh, this is touchy. So you do have rights, just as you would if you went into a doctor's office. So you have the right to receive respectful and compassionate care, regardless of who you are and what your background is. You should feel free to ask questions. And sometimes you may realize you'd like to ask a question, maybe you don't remember until after the visit. So there should be ways that you can communicate with your provider even after the session. You have the right to disagree with a plan of care that might be developed, and you should feel very confident in sharing your concerns during that visit or even after, just as you do in an in-person visit. And then you have the right to receive the same type of documentation or information, such as test results, that you would in person. So what are our rights? So with regard to vision, hearing, and speech, you have the right to accommodations for vision. So just as today, we have text running at the bottom so that you can actually read what's going on today. You also could receive, if you need any type of accommodation that would help you to hear the information in your own language, or if you need it even in sign language, that should be available to you. And we have some tips on making sure how that can happen, as well as interpretation. You have the right to have a family member or another support person available to you while you're having that visit, just like you do in the office. And one advantage of telehealth right now is a lot of times providers aren't allowing us to take individuals in with us if we're an adult. However, when you do a Zoom session, you can have all of those supports in place. And then you have the right to stop a visit if you feel uncomfortable at any time, and you should not feel badly about that. We want to ensure that all of everything goes well as you expected. So now, as far as our responsibility as the patient, what do we need to do? Well, you need to make sure that you take really good notes. Make any questions that you have ahead of time. You need to actively participate if they ask you questions or if they ask your child questions. That really needs to happen to ensure that you have a good session. And then you need to be prepared because your provider may ask you for some help. And we're going to go into these into more detail as we move through the slides today. And I haven't mentioned, but at the end of the session, we'll have time for questions. You can either place them in the chat box or you can, we'll give you a chance to visit. Okay, what's going on here? Here we go. So there are a number of names for telemedicine. They might call it a virtual visit. They might call it telecare. It might be an e-consult. It could be considered an online visit. So what you may find is that every provider kind of has their own words, but in essence, it's all telemedicine. So what do we need to do before the visit to make sure everything's going to work out okay? One of the things is a lot of people say, well, do I have to pay for a telemedicine appointment just like I do for an in-person appointment? And the answer is yes. And the reason is because you're still paying for that provider's time. We're also paying for the technology that it requires in order to have the session. And just as a reminder, what you'll want to do is make sure that you talk with your insurance company before your first visit to ensure that they cover telehealth. But it's been our experience at Oklahoma Family Network that almost really all insurance companies right now, including Medicaid, are offering families and individuals to utilize their insurance for telehealth appointments. And our hope is that that will continue even after COVID is behind us. So before you schedule your appointment, you're going to want to contact your insurance company at customer service or member services. Usually if you look on the back of your card, it'll have a member services number, just like as noted here. Sooner Care cards are that way. If you download a Sooner Care card off of the Healthcare Authority's website that has your number, it also will have the member services number. So what kinds of questions should you ask your insurer? When you ask them, if they actually cover it, you might ask them for a reference number. So that way, if there's a problem after you have the session, you can actually you have documentation that shows that it was okay for you to have the visit electronically. And you should ask them specifically, does your policy cover telehealth services and in what situations? So some will allow you to do an appointment with your provider for a sick visit or a well visit, but they may or may not cover speech therapy or another type of therapy. However, as I mentioned earlier, as a general rule, most insurers at this moment in time are actually actively encouraging telemedicine visits. And then, just be sure though to ask for any restrictions that they might have. So usually your provider's office can tell you if your insurance company or if Medicaid will cover the cost of a telehealth or telemedicine visit. You just need to ask. But again, really the best place to go is to call that member services number on the back of your card. So how do we schedule? There's a number of ways that you can schedule a visit this way. Most of the organizations, the larger health systems like Mercy, Integris, and there's a number of others, St. Francis, Warren Clinics, all across the state. They usually have a number that you can call and set up appointments, and they'll usually ask you or tell you if it would be a telehealth appointment or if it would be in person. And a lot of the offices now, if you don't have any COVID symptoms or you haven't had COVID, within a month or so, a lot of times they're starting to open back up where you can see them. A lot of offices now, especially the larger provider systems, have portals that have online scheduling. We found in my family that is the easiest way to get an appointment. If my child becomes sick during the night, or if I do, I can actually go online in the middle of the night and set up an appointment. And most of those portals, it'll tell you specifically whether the appointment is a telemedicine appointment or if it's an in-person appointment. So that's an easy way to do it. Other sites, you can go to their website and schedule online that way. You can fill out an intake form where they call you. There's central scheduling numbers, or if your office, if you live in a rural area, just call that phone number just like you always have. And you can tell them, I prefer to do this virtually because, you're concerned about COVID or you don't have transportation or for really any reason. You can usually do those interchangeably. So when you make that appointment, and this would be whether you're doing a telemedicine appointment or really any appointment, make sure that your provider has your most current phone number and or email. And the reason I say that is oftentimes they'll actually send you a link either through your email or they'll text it to you, whether you're using an iPad or a tablet or your laptop. In the case of if you're using their phone, they'll send you a text. And you actually log in to see the quote unquote, see the provider on the day of the appointment through that link. And can I ask for an interpreter? Absolutely. But that or any other accommodation should be asked for at the time that you make the appointment, because otherwise you may not be able to get those accommodations. So here's a family story that I think really brings home that last point of making sure that you ask for any accommodations when you actually make the appointment instead of asking the day of. For instance, this is a story about the Santiago family, and they booked online a telemedicine appointment. And it was actually the 8-year-old son that needed to see his neurologist. And the day of the appointment hits, they get online, they're ready to go. The specialist begins to ask them questions, and Mrs. Santiago has to stop them because she doesn't understand what they're saying because her primary language is in Spanish. Well, unfortunately, even though they waited 3 months to see the provider, they have to stop the appointment and reschedule because she can't understand or she can't participate, nor can the child in the visit. So be sure that you ask for any accommodation that you need at all ahead of time. And that same issue could come up in a situation where you had a family that had a loved one that had deafness or had hard of hearing issues. So here's some recommendations. Ask for that translator at the time that you make the appointment so that they have plenty of time, making sure that there is someone to translate for the provider that may not speak the same language. And then ask if they have a translator specifically available for the time of the appointment. And then ask your insurance provider if coverage includes that cost, if there is any additional cost. I think what you'll find is that most clinics, I haven't heard of a clinic that charged for translation, but it's not a bad question to ask when you set up the appointment. And if they say yes, then you probably want to go back to your insurance company and ask them if they'll pay for that. Again, I've not heard of any of the providers in Oklahoma charging for translation. In a pinch, providers can use Google Translate. It's not the best situation in the world, but if something happened and the translator were sick the day of your appointment, in a pinch, you can use that. But again, it's not the best. You also could have a trusted friend or family member attend with you, and they could help provide translating. But again, it is the job of the provider to ensure if you ask for translation ahead of time or interpretation ahead of time, it is their job to make sure that that is available. And that's following the American with Disabilities Act. So here's another scenario where you need to talk to your provider ahead of time. And that would be if someone needed a hearing accommodation or interpretation. And again, you would do exactly the same thing, just like you would do if you needed a translator for language. You would please tell them at the time of scheduling your appointment that you would need assistance with this. And again, it is the responsibility of the provider to have all of these accommodations available to you. Just because it's on Zoom does not mean that they're not required to follow these accommodations. They still are. So now let's say, okay, it's time. You've successfully scheduled a telemedicine appointment for you or your loved one. There's 4 things you want to remember. First of all, make sure wherever you are, it has very much reduced noise. Today I'm sitting in a little office. I have my door shut. I have dogs in crates, so hopefully they're not barking. I'm in a confidential space because sometimes you may be having conversations that you might not want the rest of your family to hear. I made sure that my internet was well connected, and we'll talk in just a bit and show you how to make sure that the tool that you're using is actually set up where it will work well, because you have to have pretty good internet because you are interchanging video. It needs to be well lit. Like today, I actually had my overhead light on, and so I got set up before we got started, and I found if I turned on the lamp, you could actually see me better than if I just only use the overhead light. Second, you want to make sure that your equipment works correctly. We're going to talk today how to make sure that that's the case. You can actually go to a website and use your phone, or you can use your laptop or your tablet, and it will tell you if your internet is high enough speed that it's going to work okay. You also want to make sure, just like when you go to an appointment, make sure that you have some paper and a pen or a pencil and other things that will really help you, during the visit. You may also need medical equipment such as a scale or a thermometer. And when you make your appointment, be sure and ask them, is there anything I'm going to need in order for us to have a successful visit? Sometimes they'll even ask you to have like a tape measure. So if you have a child that has a shunt, or it's a small baby, they might want you to measure their head. And a lot of times they'll ask you if they need blood pressure or weight. A lot of times they'll ask you to do that ahead of time. Oop, sorry about that. The other thing is make sure that you have this type of information, celebrations. If your child learned how to walk and they couldn't the last time you saw them, make sure you make it that on that list that you have those celebrations. Any observations, if you've noticed one of your child's eyes is turning out, or if your medication changed, or if you have a new provider, or you saw a provider. I remember a certain time when our daughter sometimes would see a pulmonologist in between times that she saw her pediatrician, and I would take information from the pulmonologist to our pediatrician. And the pediatrician thought she hadn't grown in, from one well child appointment to another, but we knew she had because the pulmonologist actually measured her every 6 weeks and there had been steady growth throughout that year. So something had happened that with the pediatrician, someone had written down the wrong number of inches tall. But had I not taken, if I didn't have that information for her so that she could see that our daughter had grown, she was like, oh my goodness, do we need to see an orthopedic surgeon or something? And I was like, no, we don't need to, or an endocrinologist, because thankfully the pulmonologist had been watching that very closely. She was on some medications that could have stunted growth, and we were wanting to make sure that that didn't happen. And then lastly, just preparing your child. And we're going to spend some time on this that I think will be really helpful. So this is a flow chart of the test, and this is looks pretty complicated. But the thing that you need is, if you see this, test your connection, it's www.fast.com. And if you'll actually go to that website right now on your phone or your tablet or your laptop, whichever tool that you would use, you'll actually find out. It'll tell you if you're running greater or less than 15 megapixels. And if you're not, then it may be too slow and you may not have a good experience. If you are, then you're good to go. And you can do that whether on a tablet or on a cell phone. So I don't know if you guys want to do that right now, but you're welcome to do that. If you don't have access that's fast enough, then you may actually want to visit with your provider to see if they have an idea of a place that you can go, or you might check with a friend and see if they might allow you to do it in their home if they have better Wi-Fi. All right, before the visit, checking your equipment. So you're going to go to the website that I mentioned just a moment ago to make sure that your internet connection is going just fine. You also want to test your device to make sure that your camera is working and your microphone is working. You may find if the appointment is just for you as an individual, you may want to plug in a headset, or if you have, you can also use Bluetooth headset as long as it has a microphone, but you may want to test that. Often what you'll find is when they send you the link, if you'll get on there early, you'll actually be able to tell, it'll give you an opportunity to check your camera and your microphone, and we highly recommend that. Another thing that you can do is you can set up a free Zoom account, and before your visit, you could actually set up a Zoom meeting yourself and then go into it, and then you can see, do I have a lot of distractions behind me? Are there pictures in the background? Is there a lot of clutter? Is that going to be, distract the provider that's visiting with me? It also can save a little embarrassment. People have had things in their background they didn't realize that they had. And then some people will even set up a background, where you can change what your background looks like. I'd say be really careful with that because sometimes that can distort your picture. Typically, the link will have instructions on how to see your provider. If you need to install any apps, usually they'll send a text or an email message. Usually the first time that you have an appointment, your provider will send you an email that has a link. And then there you can check your microphone, you can check your video. If you need to install an app, I know a lot of the systems, you have to install an app before you can actually use their system. And some of that is to ensure that their system is HIPAA compliant, because they wouldn't want anyone breaking into your meeting and hearing private health information during your session. Again, I mentioned earlier, having a notepad and a pencil or paper ready. If you have a plan of care, if you have a list of medications that one of your other physicians has changed, or just have a list of medications, because they're almost always going to ask you what medications that you're on. And I remember at one point in time, one of my kids was on like 7 medications. They took at all different times a day, and 3 of them all started with the letter S, and I would get the milligrams mixed up with the name of, the different medications. So it's just good to have that. And if you don't have a care notebook, okay, this is a shameless plug, you all, but we highly recommend that you attend one of our sessions on preparing a care notebook. It would give you a place to put all of the information that you would need for one of your telehealth visits. So, and then ask your provider, like I said, when you make your appointment, if you need a thermometer or a scale or a blood pressure cuff or anything else. So that way you've got that handy. Or if you don't have it available, for instance, a blood pressure cuff, they might suggest that you go to a local pharmacy and have your blood pressure taken ahead of time. You also might want to have a flashlight, because sometimes, especially let's say your child has a sore throat, they may want to look into their throat, and it might be hard to see if you didn't have a flashlight. And then just ask if there's any other equipment that you will need. And if you don't have access to those, you need to ask your provider when you make the appointment and see if they can't help you access those. Additionally, if you're asked to have certain tools like that available and you don't have it, OFN will help you access those items. So sorry, I was distracted. So there are 4 keys to opening the virtual door. I hope you all haven't fallen asleep. This is a rough way to do a training. First, you'll likely get an email or a text that will tell you how to log in. And then you need to log in. You may need to call your provider ahead of time to set it up. So there are many ways that you can set up these appointments. Before the visit, you really want to have your information available. And following the end of this session, I will actually be sending you a few handouts, and this is one of them. Family Voices developed this, and our staff that have seen it really feel like this is a great idea. And it basically is a way to help you prepare for your visit. So again, it covers those things that we talked about just a few minutes ago about make sure that you have any celebrations noted, any changes in symptoms or behaviors, any changes in medication, in school, in socialization, just anything at all that's changed, so that your provider, and if you have that all written down ahead of time, that'll really help you have a good session, because these sessions typically go even faster than what an in-person visit commonly does. So during the visit, who, how, and what to discuss. So who will attend? Do you want a helper? Do both parents of the child want to be there? Or if you're an aging individual or you're very sick and you want a friend there, or your spouse or significant other, you have the right to have anyone there that you feel like you need. Again, if something happened and you forgot to ask for a translator, you can have a trusted friend or another adult that can help translate while you're on the visit. And then just how would you like the visit to go and what to discuss? Are you comfortable helping with the physical exam? If you're not, doing a virtual visit may not be what you want to do. And then you might need to demonstrate how you support your child if the child has challenges, so that they might be able to give you ideas, because this doesn't have to be just a physician or a nurse practitioner visit. We also commonly nowadays will have speech therapy sessions or physical therapy or occupational therapy. In fact, we have a video in just a bit that we'll be showing that'll show you a very successful visit. So utilizing a tool like this, I think, will be real helpful for you. And again, we'll send that to you after we finish today. I've already covered that. Oh, one other thing that you might want to do with your child is role playing with them, or doing what's called a social story. So a social story just basically helps the child or the other family member kind of know what to expect. And so there are actually videos you can Google. I have a link in just a minute where you can actually watch a visit that's virtual, and then you could actually show it to your child or other loved ones so they know kind of what to expect, because it's kind of different, you know, than actually going in. Some people like it a lot better. They like that distance between the provider and themselves. And the other thing is, it's handy because then you don't have to leave your house. You know, you can be at home. You're not having to get out among germs. You didn't have to find a ride and that sort of thing. So you want to provide a space and items that'll help your child or young adult feel comfortable. So we've covered before the visit. Now during the visit, what can we do to ensure that we have an excellent visit? Again, you may be asked to take your child's vital signs, like their blood pressure or their temperature. You might be asked to push on your child's stomach as instructed, or there may be other procedures. Just hold your phone or the computer camera to areas. They may ask you to hold your phone or computer camera to areas on your child's body so the provider can do a thorough examination. Again, that might feel a little awkward the first time that you do it, but it actually works pretty well. So we'll watch a video here real quick of a family actually having a virtual appointment.
As a parent, you know there's nothing more important than your child's health. At Children's Hospital Colorado, we're making it easier and more convenient to connect you and your child to the right care when and where you need it. Children's Hospital Colorado puts you face to
I tried to find a local version of this, and I couldn't find it, but our children's hospitals, all three of them, you know, there's one in Tulsa called St. Francis, and then there's one here in Oklahoma City called OU Children's, and then we also have Integris Baptist Children's Hospital. They all have telehealth visits available now. The clinics do. But they didn't have a video like this, but I thought it made it easy to understand. So what are some ideas to help children or even teens feel more comfortable during their visit? And I think these are great tips. One is to provide a snack or meal just before the visit, but then also maybe have some snacks with you. So if you're trying to keep your child's attention and keep them close, that might make it a little bit easier. Make sure that you are set up in a location that they really enjoy and has good lighting. You might have a favorite toy available, just so that it'll help keep their attention. And if you can avoid scheduling the appointment during nap time, you might have better luck. I know we don't always have the option of choosing times, especially if the child is sick. You just kind of have to take it when you can get it. But if you have that opportunity to schedule, like, you know, give you plenty of time that they would typically be awake from after their nap, that might be best. And then for older kids or teens, make sure that they eat before their appointment. You know, that's going to make sure that you have a better chance of them being cooperative. Again, find a comfortable location. If you're using a laptop or a tablet, you can sit on the couch if you have a way that you can maybe place the tool in a chair while you're sitting on the couch. Sometimes that works well. Are you in a comfortable environment? They may even want to wear a hat, but of course, if they need to look at their face, they might need to take that off. But the providers are usually very good to make accommodations and allow kids to do whatever they need in order to feel comfortable. And then just having a water or drink nearby. For older kids, they might even want to do it in their room, and as long as you have a setup that would allow for that, that should work just fine. All right, so next steps and after the visit. Okay, so your provider is likely going to discuss if the child is having some sort of health concern, or if the visit is for you, they may very well discuss a diagnosis and a treatment plan. Stop and make sure that you understand and that you're comfortable with that plan. If you have any questions, be sure to ask the provider to pause a moment to give you an opportunity to ask questions. Most providers are very good at this. They know that sometimes people will get nervous during appointments and they'll ask if you have questions. Again, if you have all the questions that you have written down ahead of time, certainly that helps a great deal. But then sometimes questions will come up during the examination or while they're talking to you about, let's say that they really believe your child has an ear infection or tonsillitis or something like that. Just make sure that you ask any questions that you have to make sure you understand what medications are needed, how you can pick them up, where they're going to call them in, so that you make sure that they don't send them to the wrong pharmacy, so you're not waiting for that. And then any referrals that might be needed. And then if the physician is going to make the referral or one of their staff, or if that's something that you're going to actually have to call to make that second appointment. Because sometimes you'll see the pediatrician and they say, I really think you need to see a dietitian. Well, are you going to set that up as a provider, or is that something that our family needs to do? And then finding out, will insurance cover that? You may want to check with your insurance company, and they may have actually, if you have an HMO or a PPO, you may have to go to certain ones. Commonly, providers will know which specialist or even a dietitians are approved on your plan. But if just in case they don't, you can always call that member services hotline that's on your card. So also, if you find that you felt very rushed, you might ask them if the next time you visit with them that they would schedule a little bit longer appointment for the next visit, and then what accommodations could be made available that maybe you didn't have for this visit as you're wrapping up. So if you have any questions or concerns after your visit, isn't that the thing? Even if you're seeing a doctor in the office, you walk out, you get in your car, you start to drive off and you think, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask them about whatever it was. Should I take that medication at night or the morning? Whatever it is. It is the responsibility of your provider to ensure that you know how to connect with them. But certainly you can always pick up the phone and call and just let the person who answers the phone know you had another question that you forgot to ask. Another way is if your provider has a portal, typically email opportunity where you can actually message your provider and ask questions. The thing you need to be real careful about that is oftentimes when you message a provider through their portal, it may say that it could be up to 48 hours before you get a question answered. And if you need to know more quickly than that, which I would think in this case, you may very well, you'll probably want to just pick up the phone and make a call and ask about that. So let's talk about do's and don'ts. First, having a snack or having your child or you eat before your appointment. Now, your child may be so nervous the first time they do it, or maybe you are, that you don't feel like you can eat, but maybe have that snack available just in case. If you're the patient, don't eat while you're on camera for your appointment. Don't chew gum or eat, because that can be really distracting for the provider, and it can really take your focus from the appointment to whatever you're eating. Do turn off your cell phone ringer. So, just silence your ringer. If you have things that, if you're using a tablet or a laptop, if you have like Facebook or other apps that will that give you messages, you may want to turn those notifications off so that it's not constantly dinging in your ear, because that can be really distracting. And then don't have side conversations. If someone comes in, let everyone know ahead of time, hey, I'm getting ready to get on a telemedicine appointment. Please just let me have this little bit of time. What you'll find is when you first log in, you're usually probably waiting on the provider. They usually ask you to join the call, 15 minutes or so early. Then that way, if they finish with their prior patient early, they already have you on there. It also gives you time to make sure that your camera and your microphone are working properly. But definitely don't take another call while you're on a session. And that's just going to take letting your close family friends know you're not available right now. So do find a reduced noise environment like I did today. Don't have the appointment in a moving car while you're driving. For one thing, that's pretty disrespectful toward the provider, and it can be very dangerous. So we don't want to do that. Now, could you do one while you're sitting in your car? That might be the quietest place you can go. If you have family at home and you need privacy and you want quiet, it's okay to go sit in your car. Unless they're going to have you moving around quite a bit, that might not work well. Do make sure your face is centered and entirely in the camera view. And I would even suggest turn on your camera and test it. Look in the background. What will they see? Is there anything behind you that you wouldn't want them to see? If you're a foster parent and you certainly would not want photographs of children in your home that you're guardian for, and you wouldn't want that, to be known to people that will be on the other side of the virtual visit, make sure that those photographs behind you aren't anything that you wouldn't want them to see. And again, if you can get in an area where there's not a lot of distractions behind you, it does definitely make it easier on everyone. Make sure when you set up your camera, when I got on today, I'm using a laptop today, and I kind of moved my laptop screen forward and backward until I felt like I was pretty centrally located in the screen so that others could see me well. And if it is an appointment for a child or another person, you want to be sitting like on a couch or something, or two chairs next to one another so that you both can be in the screen very easily. Okay, so now this is a great visual of an appointment.
Mia, are you ready for our exercises? Yeah. Okay, let me show you the first one we're gonna do. What animal do you see up here? The crab. The crab. Let's do our crab walks. Ready? Let's do 10 crab walks. Belly up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good work. Yeah, we have a choice now. Do you want to do your book first, or do you want to do tennis ball guy first? Tennis ball. Tennis ball guy. Oh, he's fun. Good. And put your hands on the red circles. We're going to squeeze. A little bit tricky. Tennis ball guy likes pennies. Can you feed him some pennies? Nom, 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 nom.
Okay, so that's actually a great session that you could actually show your child so they could see what a therapy appointment might look like, because an appointment with a a physician or a nurse practitioner is going to look a little different from that. And I'll be candid with you, I'd not ever seen a session doing physical or occupational or speech therapy. And I think it might be really helpful if, especially in the case of kids, if they saw what one looked like before you actually have the visit. So I think that could be real helpful. So if you need help with your telemedicine appointment, just a reminder, you can always call your provider ahead of time and ask questions of what to expect and what things that they need for you to have available in order to have a successful appointment. And then if you have additional questions, we're very glad at Oklahoma Family Network for you to call our main office or one of our staff, and we're glad to kind of walk you through what it might be like. And we can even share links to different types of sessions that you might have available. So this has our phone number